So, I think we went through the easy stuff. This stuff's not too bad though. But this is the actual kind of, this last section is more the first section was more about kind of the idea and the processes. This last part is really the mechanics of how to get it done. But it's still, hopefully, not too in-depth. But we do want to talk about just the basics of bookkeeping and just the exercise of making sure that you're taking care of everything correctly. So I do want to stress this point. The bookkeeping part does not have to be complex. What makes it easier is your consistency in actually sitting down and doing the bookkeeping. So I'll give you an example. My just at home, because of how I was paid for a little while with one of my jobs, I got into the habit of the last day of every month sitting down and planning out all of my bills and everything for the next month. And then once a week, I just go in and I update what happened on that week so that I make sure that I didn't overdo it during that week. That is a habit that I've been doing for the last 3 years, and it's just like clockwork. Last day of the month, I sit down, it takes me an hour or so. I wish it only took 10 minutes, but it takes about an hour. And then once a week for about 15 minutes, I just have to go through and update things. And just like any other budget, there are times when, because I have teenagers, that my grocery bill was bigger than I expected. And so I sit down and then I have to have the conversation with my wife about what we can do the next week. This is the same thing, right? You set your budget, you sit down, you do the updates, and then you have a conversation with the folks who also drive some of those decisions. So you can talk about how your decision-making process will go going forward, because we need to adjust as things in our circumstances adjust. And we were mentioning over lunch, right? Our money is not one of those things that we talk about openly with people. And even when I'm talking to my wife, I get about 10 minutes and I got to squeeze it all in before she's just lost all interest in understanding how it works. And so understanding the people that you're working with, some people are more into it than others. Some people just tell me if I have $50 to spend this week and let me go. Don't tell me how it all works. This is the same thing, but it's about consistency. So just like in my house, we have that conversation every week. In your communities, this conversation should be ongoing. And it's just more just to make sure that you have control of everything. We talked about some of the bookkeeping methods. You just have to find one that works for you. Like I said earlier, I use Quicken. I think I pay $70 every 2 years to update it. And it allows me to suck all of my bank accounts in and update it. And it reconciles for me. And if I didn't put a category on one piece of spending, it will put an alert up that says, hey, you spent $20 on something that you didn't say what it was. And that's kind of one of the really important things for me, is I preach to the tenants that I work with and anyone that I talk to with regards to money, is making sure that every dollar that comes into your account has a name when it goes out. So it has to have a purpose for why it's leaving your account before it leaves. So what you don't want to see in your ledger at the end is you don't want to see a bunch of miscellaneous stuff, because that's stuff that you spent recklessly that you didn't account for. Yes?
This is sort of a nitpicky question. I don't know if there is an answer to it. But my experience in my personal budget and when I was planting in the church was that you go to Target and you buy things from 4 to 8 categories. And then you're sitting there with your receipt going $3.78 to food and trying to factor in. Is there a better way to do that? How do you think about that? Do you just break it out into more useful chunks?
Yeah, wow. I don't know if there's a good answer to that, especially if you, unless you're making specific trips for a specific, it may not be practical to say, I'm just going to go to Target to get office supplies today, and then I'm going to come back to Target to get, like, that may not make sense. What may help is as you're scanning your items, kind of have them in some sort of order so that as they show up on your receipt, they are already in a little bit of an order. That may help. It's not foolproof, but it might. Yes?
Target and other places, you just tell them this needs to be separate. So when we shop, like often we're buying on one trip for something from my work, from my wife's work, and from home. We just line them up and we say these are 3 different transactions and orders. It takes a little longer, but especially for us where we're submitting to employers, just lining it up as separate orders makes it easier.
That is possible. I am a self-checkout guy, so I...
It's even easier.
Yeah. But yeah, there's not necessarily a great way to do that. I mean, you're just going to end up with a ton of receipts, like, all the time. And it is kind of, that is the painful part of it. Now, if you want to get fancy, you buy a scanner, and then you scan all your receipts, and then they're in a PDF form, and you don't have paper flying all over the place, so it's a little easier to manage it. But there still is the exercise of going in and pulling out the individuals.
Yeah, we take pictures of all our receipts and upload them to a shared file.
Yeah.
If you're interested in doing that.
You can also do it on iPhone from your notes.
Yeah. I mean, paper gets lost. The cloud so far has been pretty steady. Knock on wood. But yeah, so find a software. If you want to use an online software, you can. There are a bunch of them out there. Some of them are free. Some of them you have to pay for. It really just depends on your comfort level. There is Excel. Some people love Excel because you can put formulas in. Like, I like Excel because I can make one form and then I don't have to make it again. I can just copy it and I can put a number in and the whole thing kind of fills itself out, which is a wonderful thing. You can use like a checkbook register. So I know that the deacons at Mosaic just have a checkbook with a checkbook register, and for the couple of years while I was managing the deacon's checkbook, like, I had to figure out how to write that small to get it in the little thing. Yeah, but it works, right? I could tell them at the end of the year where I spent money and where it went and why. And if they asked us to take care of something that was more expensive, then I could tell them, no, I don't have enough money for that unless you give me more, which can happen. But again, and I know I keep saying this, but the real key is not the tool, but it's you. It's the consistency and sitting down and doing the painful work. Now, what I would suggest is designating a time. Like, designate a time. This is my bookkeeping time. Put it in your calendar, and then you don't have to worry about that task until it pops up. So if you're one of those folks that don't schedule it, and you're always thinking about, oh my goodness, I have to do this bookkeeping. Oh my goodness, I have to do this bookkeeping. Then it becomes a chore. But if I put it in my schedule on Thursday from 4 to 5, I do bookkeeping. Then it just becomes a part of my day that from 4 to 5 on Thursdays, I do bookkeeping, and the other however many hours they are in the week, I don't think about it anymore. So if you're that type of person where it can become like, ugh, then schedule it. Scheduling always makes things more palatable, at least for me. And if I realize I can do it in 30 minutes, yippee, I can do it in 30 minutes and I can keep on going. All right, so now the financial controls and the roles. Now this is more, this is a protection agent. protecting you, protecting the community. They don't have to be super formal when we talk about financial controls, but as organizations and budgets get more complex, then the controls have to get more complex. So if you went to the seminary and asked their accountants to figure out anything, like, you might not understand anything that they're saying based off of all of the different things that you have to do. I've worked with Pittsburgh Public Schools, and for you to be able to donate a set of books to a school takes 6 steps along the way to get approval for me to give you something, right? So as you get more complex, it gets more complex. It's kind of crazy, but these things are put in place for the benefit to make sure that people don't get out of hand. The organizations that don't have financial controls turn into the Bernie Madoffs and Enrons of the world that collapse because no one is following up. So just an aside, when I was a financial advisor for just a little while, and I did a study on Bernie Madoff, and I couldn't figure out, not me as a young 26-year-old in finance, couldn't understand how this guy could be so consistently good. And I never figured it. Well, I figured it out at the end when he got arrested, because he wasn't that good. He was cheating, right? But I was baffled. I'm like, how is it possible to be this consistent along the way with returns? It's just not. But it's because they lack the controls. Had there been controls in place, someone would have found it 20 years earlier, and all of this bad stuff wouldn't happen. So every successful organization should have a fairly identified structure of controls, and they should involve everyone who manages finances. So there should be someone who consistently tracks and records spending and collections. There should be someone who reconciles the accounts and updates the budgets. There should also be someone who ensures that receipts are uploaded or scanned or in the right shoebox, but that it matches what's in the bank account and what people said they were going to spend for what they were going to spend it. And then someone should be responsible for making sure that money gets to the bank in a timely fashion. So this is just a Gene pet peeve. I hate giving someone a check and then not getting cash for a month. That messes with me. Like, I have the money today, take the money tomorrow. But it's a time thing. So, if you have folks in your communities that are writing checks to you, like, the best thing you can do is get those into the bank right away. Because I can forget about a check that I wrote a month ago, and if it didn't clear, that money might not be there by the time I get there. So it's protection for everyone. Now, these can be the same person. Maybe there is only one person to do all of these things. But even if it is just one person, I would recommend and suggest that there's someone that can just check in on you just to make sure that you didn't miss anything. So if that has to be someone from the outside, there should always be 2 eyes on these things. You don't want to be the sole person responsible, because if something goes bad, you're the only one to hold the bag. And it's just safer. It's safer. There's accountability in it. As we talked about earlier, there's a trust in it. And I've seen relationships, I've seen businesses, I've seen even some churches kind of fall to the wayside because someone deems themselves the one and only, and they don't let anybody else see what's happening. And how do you stay? How do you stay in that relationship? So all of these checks and balances will assure that no one person is responsible for everything, but it also just makes sure that nothing gets missed. You want to make sure that you know what's happening, everyone else knows what's happening. You don't need a big crew. You just need 2, maybe 3 people to say, hey, this is what our budget looks like. Does this make sense? Did I miss something? If you can, you should write this stuff down. so that as your organization grows, you're not, you just, or you don't stay and you leave and move on, that there's something in place. So lots of organizations lose so much knowledge when someone leaves, and then they hire someone else to come and do all of that work over again when they just could have a document on file. Schedule your process, so it should be completed about the same time each cycle, so whatever that cycle is for you. And I talked about that briefly. So if it's once a week, if it's once a month, the more the better. And then I don't know if this is a requirement, but if there is a report that needs to be submitted to the committee, this will help you get that done in time. I know I see an email that says there's reports due, so that's why I threw that in there. But if you have a process in place, then the reports write themselves. If you have something consistent, it just becomes a template that you're just plugging new numbers, new information. You're not changing the overall document. You're just updating the different sections so it becomes less of a chore, and it's just easier to do. And if you're using a software, some of these budget items can be created right in the software, so that you're not even actually filling out everything. If you're using Excel, and you're not quite sure how to use Excel, we have some people who like Excel here, and we can help you create a spreadsheet that calculates everything for you. All you have to do is punch in the numbers. It's really a beautiful thing. But it also helps you make sure that your documents are readily available. So you just never know when someone's going to show up and say, hey, I need to see this. Like, something looks off. Can you show me the documentation for this? And so that's good in anything. It's, the chances of getting a financial audit by the IRS are pretty low. The chances of someone who you report to coming and saying, I need to see this, how did this happen, is probably pretty likely. And you want to be prepared. So you don't want to have to fiddle with it. You should just be able to pull it up. So that's an important thing. And then maintaining strict controls over these documents will help you plan more for the future, help you avoid any dangers that come along, and if there are taxes implications and stuff like that, which I'm sure can pop up, you'll be prepared. And so all of this is in an effort to both help ensure that you have all of the tools and resources that you need, but that it's easy enough to understand and do. And like anything else, if it becomes another job, then it's something that you're going to not want to do. But if you think about it as we bring it all the way back to the parable that we talked about earlier, and we think about it from the aspect of God gave us something really special. And what I returned to him, he's not telling me what to return except for a little bit more than what he gave me. And I think that's what the parable says. Like, he didn't expect the guy with 5 bags to bring back 5 bags. He just wanted him to do something good. So let's not be the guy with 1 bag, putting it in the dirt and bringing it back to God with nothing added to it. That's all I got. Any questions? Yes?
This might be another one like some parents that doesn't have an answer, it's just cumbersome. So we have a couple different streams of the way that people give. I think one person has given a check before. Other than that, it's cash, PayPal, and we just got a Square reader.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things with Square and PayPal is that the amount of money they give is not the amount of money we get. And so we have to, in recording, literally like for their tax returns, type in what they gave, and then figure out exactly how much we actually got. And so it's like just all manual. Do you know if like does QuickBooks do anything with that, or is it? I don't know if there's any better way to do that.
Yeah. I don't know if PayPal should be able to print you a report that shows that breakdown of the fee that you pay.
So for Commonwealth, it's similar. So we use a planning center to collect the donations, like a church thing.
Yeah, you mentioned that before.
Yeah, and it automatically creates the tax statements at the end of the year. And then our payments are processed by we use Stripe, and then every month when I'm for that month, and I find the fees in the spreadsheet.
And then you send it to me.
And I record that under like a separate line item for the expenses for, yeah.
Right now, the only difference is I don't print the sheet, but
Yeah.
it actually might make it easier to take it in.
Yeah, that's downloaded, yeah.
What was the thing that generates the tax letters?
Planning Center,
Planning Center. Thank you.
yeah, it's their giving app. Is the thing like that.
So yeah, you're right. People should get credit for the full donation, even though the systems that we use charge a fee.
After the first year was that we were just recording what they gave, which is not, it wasn't like a drastic difference, but it was enough to be like, oh, our books don't match up.
Yeah, so that fee is just an administrative fee, right? So it can go into, and it should be standard.
Yeah.
Like PayPal is like,
Standard, like 2.5%.
yeah, and then like 30 cents a transaction or something. So you can actually almost, create, if you're using Excel, create a formula that calculates that. It may not be quite as accurate, but
Because if someone does do a bank-to-bank transfer,
then there's not usually a fee with it.
fee.
But credit cards, the Square is going to certainly charge, and PayPal's.
Square doesn't, if you accept American Express on Square, it throws your
It
phone.
also depends if you swipe it or if you type it in.
Ah, jeez.
There's no- But oh yeah,
They don't want you to type it in. They
Oh,
want you to
no.
swipe it. It's a bigger fee if you type it in.
it's like 1% more. It's like 3.5% if you.
It's kind of crazy. Because they want you to buy the chip reader. I think that's the rationale.
Well, and it's fraud.
Um,
Because anybody can give you a credit card. They want
Yeah.
a card present transaction.
So yeah,
cynical.
but that may be one of those things because of the tedious nature of it that you just block off a section of time to do it.
Yeah.
So like you're not doing it every week.
That's going to Monday before the NWC reports.
Yeah. Yes.
This is just maybe a minor thing, but just taking a look at your sample budget, I think I would tend to put a little more emphasis or a little more thought into the revenue side of the budget, just based on all the work with the worshiping communities I've done nationally and internationally. First of all, congratulations, you have a revenue side. People submit a budget and it doesn't have anything in the way of income on it. But some of the questions that have been raised here can be solved by breaking that down in the kind of detail that you did with the expense side of the budget. So instead of just listing tithes and offerings, you might want to list special gifts or rental income or grants or partner congregations or whatever, fundraisers, things like that. So because there are a lot of different possibilities there, and it's important to think about, like Karen's gift of $5,000 that came and went, for in and out, would clarify that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think when you look at revenue entries in your budget, you should specify where they're coming from, how they're coming in, whether or not they're one-time gifts or reoccurring, right? So, because reoccurring gifts you can plan for a little bit more, especially if you're setting up automatic payments. Yeah, I mean this is just Mosaic's lack of emphasis on bringing in money, but I'm taking digs at Mosaic. I mean we bring in more than we spend, and that's a good thing. But it's just an approach. I mean, I grew up in an old Pentecostal church where the pastor would preach, he'd take an offering, and then he'd preach some more while they went and counted the money, and if there wasn't enough money in there, he'd come back out and ask for more. That's extreme. But there's lots of different methods, but I agree. If you have multiple streams of income, you want to be able to both account for those and then project for the future. Absolutely.
A helpful breakdown in our individual giving categories, we always break it out in terms of online checks and like cash, because especially online is huge, and for that reoccurring kind of space, over 50% of our giving is from online regular donation, but just that breakout is helpful too in knowing,
Sure.
helping you track.
Well, we consider a lot of in-kind donations.
Okay.
And so, for example, if someone donates a meal, we've averaged out the cost of what it takes for us to provide a certain meal for a certain number of people, and then we consider that a donation of that amount.
Yeah, and in that you would just have a separate, a separate category that is in kind. So yeah, you can break that out as well. So if you're getting gifts like that, and you want people to get credit for the gift for their tax purposes, yes. And then in your budget, you're not putting that in as revenue for money to spend, because you'll have both a revenue and then an incoming and an outgoing. You know, that'll be part of your meals going out. That's a little more technical, but in-kind stuff will always have an incoming and an outgoing that match, so that they always zero out at the end. So they're not really having an effect one way or the other.